I'm not getting good.
Yes, he's our president-elect for the Future Professional section. Before we get started, I'll give a little introduction for our speaker tonight. So I'm very happy to introduce today's Sandy Morley. Sandy earned her degrees from SUNY Cortland, Adelphi University, and the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts. She was a physical education teacher for 25 years before retiring in 2011 as a principal at Bethlehem Middle School in Delmar. Sandy served as the New York State AHPERD president in 1996 and was a member of the board of directors for 11 years. Currently, she serves as the president of the New York State AHPERD Foundation and as a presenter at the Ken Demas Future Professional Leadership Academy. I'm happy to welcome Sandy Morley.
Thank you, Rochelle. It's good to see everybody and welcome. I don't think I'm really going to add much to what Rochelle said. I've worked in the Mamaroneck schools down in Section 1, in the Guilderland schools in Section 2, and I retired from the Bethlehem schools also in Section 2 as a physical educator and a coach, and then I went to the dark side. So tonight's presentation is one that I usually do at the Leadership Academy, and that's where I met Rochelle and Anthony. And it's great to be able to do it to more students actually here tonight. So I want to thank you for coming. I know it's break time. I know you're on break. So thank you for taking the time to come and share some info, I guess, with you. I want to tell you that Dr. Manson's going to be monitoring the chat, and this is a little different way for me to teach, and I find it frustrating because of the little less interaction that I prefer if I see you in person. But please do throw questions or comments into the chat, and somebody will pick them up if I don't see them. I'm very, very happy to stop, and I'll check in with you every once in a while if there are questions, but to respond for clarifications or anything else. So what are you going to get from tonight's presentation? Well, you know, I always thought that when I went to a conference, I just had to come home with one good idea, either something that changed my philosophy or something I could use in my classes. It's possible you won't get anything tonight. I'm not going to presume to stand here and say everything I have to say is golden and you'll use it, but I hope you'll find at least one thing, and maybe you'll find more. The concept tonight is for you to find little nuggets of information that you can put in your backpack and use as a professional. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and try and open my PowerPoint. Very good. Everybody see that? Are we good? Yes? Okay, thank you very much. So you will receive a link to this PowerPoint at the end of the presentation. So you'll have my information, you'll have my contact information, and I'm more than happy to respond to any questions you have. Rochelle and Anthony know that I'll get back to you pretty quick. The reason for this presentation, as I came to the end of my teaching career, I started to think about all the things I had learned over the years. And there are some other professionals here tonight who have been in the business a long time. And, you know, we find that we learn from one another. We learn from watching people. We learn from listening to people, but we never really know what we don't know until we know it, which is kind of crazy. So the reason for this presentation is that to try and share some of the things that I learned along my journey to give you a head start so that you can go in with more things that I did. So do I know what I don't know? The LBWA prevention that you see on the slide is I want to stop you from learning by wandering around. And I think a lot of us do that. We start our career and we wander around and we pick up things as we go. And I'm trying to get you a little bit ahead of that curve. So the things I'm going to talk about tonight, and they're all kind of bulleted, separate, standalone concepts. They may be organizational, they may be political, social, academic, financial, which probably is the one that you should pay attention to the most, and motivational. So these are some of the things that you can acquire that support your collaborative efforts with the people that you're going to run into the school system, parents, community, colleagues, and any other people that you're going to run into professionally as you go along your way. I always tell my students, and Rochelle and Anthony would remember that, I looked around the room probably early in the presentation and I suggested very strongly that people take notes. But I'm not going to tell you to take notes because this is not the kind of presentation where you're going to have to feed back any information. The best reason for you ever to take notes is because you really want to, because there's something that you hear or you see that rings a bell. It's something you might use in the future. It's something you're going to put away, or it's something that triggers a aha moment for you. And only you will really know what works for you. Something that strikes one person will not strike another. So the only reason I suggest that you take notes, because some of the things I'm going to say are not in the PowerPoint. There may be something that works for you. Okay. Oh. There we go. So the first bullet I'm going to give you is talking about keeping your ducks in a row. And this is an organizational kind of thing. You know, everybody keeps their organization differently. Some keep it on your phone, on a calendar. Some keep paper calendars. Some use Alexa to remind them about meetings. Some use social media to remind them about things. But you need to find something that works for you, whatever that pattern is. And the reason is because you have to follow through with whatever you say you're going to do or whatever you're supposed to do. You have to do what you say you're going to do when you said you're going to do it. Because if you don't, you lose credibility, and credibility is everything for you. You have to maintain that credibility so that when you go on to do other things, people respect you and they understand where you're coming from. You should always be on time. You should not only be on time, but you should be early, always. And you have to also stay on task. You know, you can't have a zillion things going on and not attend to any of them. There's a great quote that I found that says, you know, to stay on task, if you chase two rabbits, both will escape, right? You're going two different directions. You catch neither of them, you got nothing done. So keep yourself organized in whatever manner works for you. Be an active listener. We listen to a lot of things and we multitask a lot. So when you're speaking to someone, whether it's a student or whether it's a colleague, or especially if it's a parent or administrator, you have to be an active listener. And that means good eye contact and acknowledge what they're saying so that they are aware that you're paying attention to what they're doing. One way you can do that is you can validate what you're hearing. So when you start your conversation, when they're done, you can say, you know, I hear what you're telling me. I hear what you're saying. That's always a good way to start. But one of the things we all do is that as you're having a conversation with me, I'm already thinking about what do I want to say, or you're triggering something that I want to tell you. And as soon as that happens, I'm no longer listening to you anymore. So you've got to be really, really open to focusing on the speaker and paying attention to them. Take time to think about what you want to say. You don't have to start as soon as they're done. Think about what you want to say. Wait time is really good, not a problem. Don't be defensive. And your body language also is very important as to how you respond and how people take what you're going to do. And I'll tell you a little story. When I was a first-year teacher, I taught in Mamaroneck down in Westchester County. And I was coaching field hockey at the time. And my very first back to school night at Hommocks Middle School, I was a middle school teacher, came right after I'd finished a practice. So I'd run back to the school, I had showered and changed, and I was putting up some information on the wall for the parents as a parent came in, and she happened to be one of my hockey players' moms. She also was, which I didn't know at the time, the president of the Board of Education. And she said, I'd like to talk to you about my daughter. And I said, fine, that's great. I'd love to talk to you. And I kind of kept doing what I was doing. And she kept talking and I was listening, but I was putting up these sheets on the board. And finally, she ripped into me and she yelled and she said, would you please stop what you're doing and look at me when I'm talking to you? And it just blew me out of the water. And she was absolutely right. I was listening, but she didn't know I was listening because I wasn't being an active listener. And that kind of blew me up for the whole night. I couldn't even do my presentation for open house. But it was a good lesson, and it was a lesson I never stopped learning. The other thing you want to do is learn about how do you come to conclusion? How do you come to a positive result, including everybody in your discussion? You know, the art of consensus building really is something that you can learn to do, and it allows you to learn how to collaborate to come to a decision rather than just saying, this is what I think we ought to do. And that's a top-down versus grassroots kind of thing. And it's not just when you're in a position of power. If you're a member of a physical education staff or a health education staff, and you're trying to move your curriculum along or make some changes, especially as a new teacher, you've got some pretty good ideas and passionate ideas. And you have to be ready to massage it a little bit so that you can hear what other people are saying. And sometimes consensus means that each person gets a little bit of what they want, but not everything. So you're trying to empower others to help you make that decision, because the result will be a much stronger result if everybody has a stake in it. And one of the good ways to finalize any kind of decision or new activity or new program is, can everybody live with it? That's a good question to ask yourself and ask around the table if you're doing collaborative work with people. Sometimes you can't make things happen. And I can't tell you how many young professionals I've talked to that have gone into the school system and said, you know, I'm working with these people. They've been there forever. They don't want to change anything. I keep on bringing up all these ideas and they don't want to do anything. Nothing will stick. And I heard a quote many, many years ago from a woman named Joanne Owens-Nosler, who's a pretty well-known physical educator nationally and internationally. And she said, you know, Sandy, you got to learn when to back off or move on. And her comment was, if you're riding a dead horse, dismount. If it's not working, let it go, because you can beat it and beat it and beat it. It's never going to get up. So I'm going to take a quick break to see if there are any questions. Anything, any comments, questions so far? I'll do this every once in a while. So if you have any comments, please throw them in the chat. Okay. So here's another steal. U-turns are allowed. This came from one of our New York State AHPERD past presidents, Judy Ingram. And there's always two sides to a story. You know, whether it's a political conversation, which is an awful thing to have right now, or just what you think is best for a school or best for you or best for kids. People are going to have different opinions. When you're making decisions, make sure you get all the information that you possibly can. So be as informed as you possibly can before you make a decision, and don't rush to judgment. Changing your mind doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're thoughtful. So take your time. It is absolutely okay to change your thinking on a subject. And I'll bet if we came up with one concept today, you might have a very definite belief about that. And if I asked you the same thing in 10 years, you might feel differently. And I've felt myself do that. Things that I was really, really adamant about as a young professional, as I got on in years, I changed my mind with good reason. And it's okay to change your mind. Just don't flip-flop. Don't go back and forth. You know, have a reason and rationale for what you're doing. Throw up in the chat, and Dr. Manson, maybe you can read for me. Who are the important people that you need to know in a school building? Just throw something in the chat if you can do that for me. Who are the power people in a school? And Dr. Manson, maybe you can read some of those out to me, because I can't, or maybe I can see the chat.
So we have principal.
Yep.
Head of administration, superintendent.
Yep. Anything else?
Not yet. Custodian, secretary.
There we go. Joanne Hamilton. I should have known. Yeah, those are really, really important. You know, you as a health or physical education teacher.
School counselor, another one.
Yeah, really good.
Office staff.
Yep, I can see those.
Oh,
Yep.
okay, good.
Yep, thank you. Nurse is somebody else. Yeah, those are really important. You know, I think the first reaction for most of us when we ask that question is that, yeah, it's the superintendent, it's the principal. They make the decisions. And they do and they don't. I would say that the first person as a physical education teacher I want to be buddied up to is the custodian. because they're going to line your field, they're going to clean your gymnasiums, they're going to fix things for you, they're going to help you build things. You've got to be connected with your nurse who's going to take care of your kids. Secretaries will facilitate a lot of things for you. And the purpose of this slide really is to talk about those roles and that you differentiate between roles and people. You know, if people just look at you as a physical education teacher or a health teacher, they don't know your likes, your dislikes, what you do on your off time, your experiences, your expertise. They don't know those things. You have to get to know people in order to find those things. And I'll tell you a short story. In 1996, I went down to the Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia. And I was down there as, of all things, a security guard. Now, you could never do that today. Never, ever do that today. But
Hang on, I will,
thank you. Thank
okay,
you.
I muted, yep.
Thanks. So I was assigned to the USA basketball teams, and I would sometimes be posted on their team floor where their rooms were, sometimes at the dining hall, sometimes at the USA offices, sometimes down in the parking facility. And I had a uniform on, and you know, I was just another security guard. Those people had no idea that I was a teacher. They had no idea that I was the president of a state association. They had no idea that I coached kids, that I was a coach myself. They didn't know anything about me. And in lots of ways, we were treated like nothing, like we weren't very important. And I recognized that right away. And I certainly wasn't going to say, hey, you know who I am. It didn't really matter. But the fact was that we tend to look at people by their roles sometimes. And that means we overlook them as people. And I don't ever want you to make that mistake. It's a really, really important thing to do. To recognize that your secretary is probably one of the most valuable, powerful people in your schools. They can make things happen for you. It's not all about the principal. It's not all about the superintendent. You'd be surprised how much some of those people can support you when you really need it, without going to the people who have the titles. So be very aware of that. You know, this next piece on this called shaking hands, I just had to add the or not this week because we can't be shaking hands right now. But I want to talk about it because I found it was a really important piece for me in my career. First of all, it's very professional behavior. In Europe, people shake hands all the time to greet one another when you're introduced with somebody, whether it's in business or not. Here in the United States, traditionally, if you're a business person, when you're introduced to somebody, you shake hands. For interviewing, I always found that it's really important to be shaking hands when you meet someone. We can't do that right now. But I think the value is still there. And at some point, you may be able to do this again. You may never feel comfortable shaking hands with people without washing your hands right after. I don't know. But I did want to talk about this and how I use this in particular. I used to coach cross-country running, coached for about 20 years, high school varsity cross-country. And we had a pretty big team of boys and girls, probably about 80 or 90 kids. And at the end of each practice or each meet, before they left for home for the afternoon, each athlete would come to their respective coach and shake their hand. And what that gave to me was a chance to hold on to that kid and look into their eyes and see if everything was okay from that day. Maybe they had a great day. Maybe they had a great race. Maybe they had a tough day or a tough workout. Maybe something was going on at home. It gave me a short window of time with every single athlete to just check in with them. And they couldn't go anywhere because I had their hand. And I remember kids going to get into their parents' car to go home and say, oh, forgot to talk to coach. I'll be right back, and ran right back. Every single student did that. I found it a real value of making contact individually with students. And as I said, you may never have that opportunity to do this again. I don't know, but keep this at the back of your head, okay? Be student-centered. We have to make a lot of decisions as teachers. You're going to be on committees in school in addition to being in your classroom. And very often we get sucked into this adult perspective of making decisions for kids and about kids without thinking about what's best for them. But I always want you to think about always coming back for what's in the best interest of your students, what's in the best interest from a child perspective, not what's easiest for us as adults. Where are most of the offices for physical education teachers? Where are they? Pop something in there for me. Where are they located in the school building? Nobody?
Locker room,
Locker room?
near
The
gym.
gymnasium, the gym.
Gym,
near the
gym.
gym. Yep,
Yep.
absolutely right. And the gym usually is not near anything else. In older buildings, the locker rooms are downstairs, which means the offices are downstairs in the dungeon. And it's really easy to get sucked into that area of just be where that is. You know, you get nestled into your little office there. And sometimes the men and the women are not even in the same offices, which is really a shame because they need to be together to have conversations about their kids. You need not to get sucked into that room. When you have free time, you have to move beyond your teaching area and get out to the rest of the school building for a lot of different reasons. One is that you need to see what kids in your classes are doing in other classes. You may have students that are outstanding in your class who are a pain in the neck in other classes. And the reverse, you may have kids that are cutting it up every day with you, and you go and you watch them in a science class and they're amazing. You need to see how kids function in other places, and they also need to see you. It's easy to go in and ask somebody if you can come and sit in on their class. It's easy to be out in the halls while kids are changing classes so that you can see them and they see you. But you need to explore your school and watch how students behave other places. The other thing that you need to do to get outside of your comfort zone or outside of your office is, if you're not a member of New York State AHPERD, you absolutely need to be for so many reasons. That's why Rochelle and Anthony are here today, because they've attended the Leadership Academy. That's how they got into leadership positions. The opportunities that you have through this association, like here, meeting some of the people here, will give you the networking you need to move around and get questions answered and make connections. So I really strongly, if you're not a member, you're very lucky that this is an opportunity that you have, but you really ought to be a member, and you need to stay a member, even if you don't have a job at the time. You need to remain a member throughout your career so that you can take, and then at some point you can start to give. It's really important. Acknowledging successes. You know, one of the reasons that you want to get out of your area that you're teaching in is to meet other colleagues in your building. And a lot of things are going on with colleagues in your building. They're having babies, they're getting married. Unfortunately, sometimes there are passings. They get new jobs, they get an award, and you can connect with people by doing some very, very simple things, by sending a note to congratulate somebody about a baby's birth, or maybe somebody became a grandparent, somebody received an award. And it's great to go up to them personally and congratulate them, but it's even better if you just jot a short note, stick it in their box, and let them know that you're thinking about them. The other thing that I want you to be aware of, you may not be in a position to do this yet, but some of you may have received letters from maybe a teacher, maybe a principal, maybe you got an award. And at the very bottom of the letter, it has a little note that says CC. So it went to somebody else. And what that means is that if I write Dr. Manson a note congratulating her on getting an award, I may copy it down below to her dean of students at Adelphi. And what does that do? Well, that makes that dean aware that Dr. Manson got an award. And where does it go? It goes in her personnel file. Okay. And the same thing can happen at colleges. You know, you may get information, you may get awards, you may get acknowledged, and you want to keep copies of those and send copies to people who it's important to. As you get to be more mature in your teaching experience, you may be writing those letters. You may be writing a letter to a student congratulating them on something, and you may want to copy the letter to their guidance counselor so it can go in their file. So these are this is what I call indirect communication links. You're kind of letting somebody know without telling them directly. Okay, if something happens that you want to acknowledge someone, it should always go to the superintendent of schools if it's a good thing, so they know what's going on. So where would you run into the most gossip in a school district if you're in a building? Where would you be hearing the most gossip? Possibly in the hallways. Yep, faculty room, teacher lounge, lunchtime. You're right. Yep, lunch area. Absolutely. You know, teachers like to talk. Sometimes it's really good, but it can get really tough. It can get really gossipy, and you don't want to get caught up with that. Be very, very careful. You don't want to be influenced by these loud and strong voices if they disconnect with your gut feeling. Sometimes people are talking directly to you and they're looking for a response and they're looking for you to get on board. Make your own judgments, use some deflectors like, oh, is that so? Doesn't suck you into the conversation, or, oh, I wasn't aware of that. And you just kind of let it go. Or, I don't really know. You'll have to ask somebody else about that. So avoid that as much as you possibly can. You know, in schools, any of the people who've been in schools for a long time will tell you that there are always people there who will, the first thing they'll say to you is, oh, I got 6 more years, 4 more months, and 3 days before I retired. Can't wait. That's kind of a downer, you know? And then there are people who will tell you, you know, I've been here for 30 years. I know what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. But I want to tell you that experience doesn't always equal expertise. And this is another quote I picked up that you may find interesting. It was written by a man named Rodney William Whitaker, and he goes by the name of Trevanian. And this is what he said. Do not fall into the error of the artisan who boasts of 20 years experience in craft, while in fact, he only had 1 year of experience 20 times. So that's that teacher that in September, on September 13th, goes to his or her file, fills out the lesson plan for September 13th, and teaches the same thing that they taught the last 19 years. And don't think for a second there aren't people out there that do that. So in fact, that person is not growing. You need to be a constant learner. You do not want to be somebody like this who is, I'm really good at what I do because I've done it 20 times. I've done it exactly the same way every time, and I'm an expert at it now. So that person's just not growing. So think about that. You want to change and you want to grow. You want to constantly be growing. And that's where coming to workshops and going to conferences makes a huge difference for you. Now, the next couple of slides you should be really, really comfortable with because you live in cyberspace. This was something that, you know, halfway through my career really became a big thing. And I think technology is tough. It is, we cannot live without it. I mean, look at what we're doing now. We would be so separated if we didn't have technology and weren't able to do what we're doing today. But you've got to be very, very careful about what you do with it. Some communications still need to be in person. You cannot take back what you put up online. You cannot take back what you write in an email. And sometimes we get into these email, I used to call them letter writing campaigns because that's what we used to do, but now they're email writing campaigns. So I write a letter or a note saying, you know, I think this is really wrong and yada, yada, yada. And then somebody writes back and then we go back and forth and back and forth. And at some point, you got to stop with that. And you either have to get on the phone or you have to ask for a personal meeting. And I will tell you where that is most important is with parents. Do not get into an email exchange back and forth when there's a concern from a parent. At some point, you need to pick up the phone and say, you know, Mrs. Smith, I got your email. I know you're very concerned about how Johnny's performing in school. I'd like to talk to you about that. That's much more appropriate than responding online. If it's a compliment online, different story. But don't get caught up in writing emails back and forth. And if it's really serious, you need to meet with that individual, whether it's a colleague or a supervisor in person and have that conversation in person. You have to be very, very careful about what you write, how you write it, because you're not going to be able to take it back. And that leads right into social media. You know, again, we've got many, many pros and cons. I was just reading Anthony's quote. Yeah, you're right. That person's probably not a New York State AHPERD member. Anthony, you're right. He's talking about the 20-year experience guy. Yeah, you're right. Social media, you know, be careful about what you post. And I will tell you that employers absolutely are checking social media. If you're applying for a job, they're looking you up. And I'll give you a point in case last week, our state office, the New York State AHPERD office, was hiring a new person in the office. They were looking for new people, and they were interviewing last Friday. They had about 20 applications, and at least one came through where they checked the social media and immediately took that person off for some of the posts that were up on their social media. So don't think for a second they're not going to look. So be very, very careful what you put up there. And I will tell you, I wasn't even on Facebook until I retired. I just couldn't afford to be based on what was going on, because you have to be really, really careful about that. So as a new teacher, there are a lot of things that you have to do, and you have to suck it up just a little bit. You have to be a good listener. And it doesn't mean, I'm not saying as a first-year teacher, or second-year teacher, or third-year teacher, you can't contribute and you can't add your 2 cents, not at all. But you will learn a lot by watching what other people do and listening to what other people say, not just in your own department, but within your school. It will help you form your own opinions and learn what to do and what not to do, and also give you the opportunity to ask questions about what you're seeing. So don't forget that. Don't get so anxious that you don't forget. People in there have good experiences. Take advantage of those. Your actions will speak louder than your words. You can say, you know, I've done this, I'm doing that, I'm coaching this, I'm doing that. You don't have to be saying anything if your actions are positive and you're around and you're doing things. People will see what you do. They don't need to hear about what you're doing. Do everything. Especially as the first 5 years of teaching, do everything. You know, if they need volunteers, I'll do that. Go to the dances, you know, attend the dances, attend the concerts, be outside when kids are coming or leaving school as much as you can. Be in the hallways so you can talk to colleagues and teachers. Go out and see people on your breaks instead of getting stuck in your room. So do everything. I will tell you, when I was a assistant principal, I had parents come up and say to me, you know, Sandy, do you ever go home? And that was probably the best compliment I could get, because what they were seeing was every time they were at school, they saw me, you know, so it gave them the impression, and it was true, that I was really involved and I was there all the time. That's what you want people to react to. Volunteer. You know, people are looking for things to do. You don't have to be an expert in anything. Volunteer to supervise picnics, supervise trips, if we ever have trips again. Do everything and be very, very patient. Somebody told me a couple years ago about a second-year teacher. He was assisting at the varsity basketball, on a basketball team, and the varsity coach retired. And as a second-year teacher, he didn't get the varsity job, and he was really mad. And I thought, well, you know, you've got 2 years experience. Maybe there was somebody else in line. You have to pay your dues. You have to be patient. And again, going back to the other point, actions speak louder than words. If your actions are positive and you're doing what you should be doing, you will be noticed. And the last thing is absolutely no whining. Modeling good behavior as a professional. This is really, really important for you. You want to look good, look professional. You're always on stage, whether you're in school, and even if you're living, especially if you're living in the community that you teach in, you need to be aware of how you look all the time. You have to be aware of what you wear in your classroom. You're not a gym rat. You shouldn't be wearing sloppy sweatpants to class, but you should be wearing something that's appropriate to the activity that you're doing. Sometimes that means you have to be in different kinds of things. When we talk cross country, I changed into running clothes so that I could run with the kids. But be aware that you, again, are going to be judged, and therefore physical education and health teachers will be judged by how you look. So dress professionally for your job, talk intelligently, speak well, act responsibly, write maturely, be very careful about sending things home. You might want to have people proofread. I know there are principals that will not let any of their teachers send anything home unless it's proofed. Because again, if you send something home and there's a typo in it, or more than one typo, you know what'll happen is that people say, you know, it just came from a gym teacher, it's no big deal. But that's a reflection on every physical education teacher and every health teacher. So be very, very careful about how you write. If you're not a great writer, find an English teacher to help you write, and they will do that with you, and you'll learn that way. And the last thing is to talk a little bit about how you dress for open house. You should be dressing business attire for open house, not a sweatsuit, not stuff that you would teach in. If you look at other people, what they will do for open house, you know, for ladies, dress pants or a suit or a skirt or dress, and for gentlemen, dress pants. And you don't have to wear a suit, but certainly a tie would be appropriate. You should not be wearing a sweatsuit to open house. You know, you have to look, if you want to be treated like a professional, and we fight for this all the time in our profession. We've been fighting to be dealt with like professionals ever since I started, and that will continue until you are through with your career. I'm quite certain. Steal good ideas. Now, a couple of times in this presentation, I've already told you that this is where I got this from, this is where I got that from. Absolutely steal good ideas and use them. There's no reason for you to have to recreate everything. But what I want you to do is I want you to adjust it so it fits you, you know, acknowledge what you've taken and modify it so it works for you and it fits your personality and what you're presenting and how you're saying it. And then acknowledge where you got it from, and use it. You know, and I'll give you an example. One of my best steals is, for some of you, if you've been to the New York State AHPERD conference and you go to the JB Nash dinner Friday night, all the past presidents of the association are introduced, and they come in the very beginning, and they're wearing these really nice maroon blazers with the president's logo on it. And that was a brainchild that came from one of the past presidents, but they were using it at another situation. I stole it, changed it, adjusted it, and I give Shirley Bowen the credit for coming up with the idea to use at Cortland, who uses that idea for their Hall of Famers. So if you see it a good idea, don't be afraid to use it. Don't be afraid to say, you know, it wasn't mine, so I really shouldn't do that. Do it. So the next couple of slides may be some of the most important that I can give you tonight. Something that really we don't pay attention to in undergraduate or graduate work is how to get yourself financially solvent when you become a teacher. So this is called the language of money. And what I want to tell you is I want to tell you to invest in yourself and how to do that. When you go into a school system, you'll have to fill out paperwork for your pay, and you'll have an opportunity to get involved with a TSA. Does anybody know what that means? TSA? Anybody know what that stands for? And I'll tell you, it does not stand for Transportation Security Administration. Anybody? Some of you may be involved with these already, but probably not.
Tax shelter annuity.
There you go. Thank you so much. A tax shelter annuity. And this is part of how you can begin to save off of your paycheck. And the school system will facilitate that for you. They also usually have some kind of a financial advisor that you can meet with, and you should meet with as you start. You know, it's really exciting to get your first paycheck when you get a job. The first year that I had my job, I took a trip to go skiing out west. I was so excited just to have money I could do that with. And you should do those things, but you have other responsibilities, and you need to start saving right away and then stop even thinking about it. You know, you should not be and will not be thinking about retirement. I didn't think about retirement till I was in my 40s. And then I kind of said, oh, I wonder what's going on with that. If you set this up right, you won't have to think about retirement. Hopefully things will go your way. But one of the things I want you to do is I want you to think about the concept of paying yourself first. And what that means is that you will take a certain amount of money out of every paycheck that you get. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'm going to recommend, based on what I think you might be making in your first job, $100 per paycheck. And that's probably $100 for a 2-week pay period. That's not going to be a lot of money. It may sound like a lot of money now, but when you get a full-time job, it may not be. But you know what? If it's $50, fine. If it's $20, fine. But I suggest that you start with that concept of $100. And you can save it through, they'll deduct it right through your school system and set you up in a portfolio where it will be invested for you and very conservatively. And you need to learn a little bit more about this. And I'm going to give you a really good example of how this can make a difference in your life if you watch this next slide. If I can get it open. So on the left side in the green, we're going to talk about a paycheck that's going to come to you after a pay period for $1,500. Gross means that that's the amount that you're going to get paid. Now that's very little, relatively little for a full-time teaching job. But we're going to use that number because it's easy to talk about. So you get a check and it says it will have a box in there that says gross. For a gross amount you've earned for these 2 weeks or this week, $1,500. All right. Now, out of that $1,500, the school system is going to take money out of that. They're going to take it out for state tax, federal tax, health insurance, FICA, a number of things are going to come. Union dues may come out of that. All right. So at the end of that, you're going to take home, for example, $10,050, the second green number down there. All right. They've taken out of that $1,500, all that stuff to take care of that. They have to do that. You get to take home $1,050. So I just told you, you pay yourself first, right? So you take $100 out, you put in your savings account. Good. Nice job. That means you're taking home $950 for that pay period. So far, so good? Okay. Look on the other column. Same $1,500 gross. All right. If you go into a tax shelter annuity, the office will actually take your $100 out for you and it'll go into your investments. So you take it out before taxes. And then you're only taxed on $1,400, not $1,500. So your taxes are going to be less. They're going to take out less for health, less for federal, less for state. And you're going to end up taking out home $980. That's $30 more than if you took it out later. If you let them do it for you, you're actually going to take home more money. So far, so good? Okay. Now, let's see how it all adds up. If you look on the whole year of that, your annual take home, well, let's look at the green first. You were taking home $950 times 21 pay periods. So you have taken home $19,950. Okay. But if you use the tax shelter annuity where they took out the $100 before they taxed you, $980 you're taking home times 21 pay periods, you actually took home that year $20,580. You took home more money to do what you needed to do for your phone, for your food, for your vacation, for your partying, for your car insurance, for your apartment. You're actually taking more money home and you're still investing $100. So when you look at that $100, 21 pay periods, that's $2,100 that you've invested. If it's invested annually and your financial advisor would help you do this, and 5 years, $2,100, that's $11,824 at 4%. 4% is not a large amount. Our economy is doing much better than that right now. You can earn anywhere from 4 to 15% on your investments if they're handled very wisely. But at the minimum, in 5 years, you've made $11,000, almost $12,000. And once you set this up, you don't think about it. You don't take money out of this. This is not vacation money. This is not money that you're going to say, oh, you know, I have that $12,000 that I saved over the last 5 years. I'm going to go buy a house. This is not for that. This is for retirement. And this is what you just leave there. You ignore it. You let it go. And it's painless. Okay. So if you have questions about that, you can talk. There are a lot of people you can talk to about that, but it's something you need to pay attention to when you're filling out your first paperwork for your first job. They're going to say, you know, this is what you're going to be taking home, and ask about a tax shelter annuity. And then they'll say, oh yeah, I didn't think you'd be interested, but this is what it's about. And ask, do you have a financial advisor that's connected with the school district? Okay. Are there any questions on that? I'm going to pause and take any questions if there are right now. I know it's kind of hard to do in a chat, but
I have a question.
yeah, please.
So the school district that I work at right now, at TA,
Mhm.
they already have a thing that takes out for retirement. Is that the same thing as this, or is that something different?
You know what? You probably, Jacob, ought to go and ask where that money's going, how it's being invested, and how it's coming back to you. It may very well be a tax shelter, but you should go ask that question.
Yeah, I'll have to check like the paycheck and stuff and see
Yep.
if it does.
It
Because
may-
I know I had to sign up for it. I had
Yep.
to like sign up to go into retirement.
It may very well be that they've done that automatically, but you know, you can look on your pay stub, but also call the secretary at the office in the personnel office and ask her where it's going, who's responsible. And you may want to also ask them about a financial advisor, because most districts are connected with a company that will provide somebody that you can sit and talk with.
Okay.
So that would be a great thing to do. And that's a good thing to know, you know, where's that money going and how much are they taking out?
It's almost, I don't work that much, so I think it's like 3%. It's like tiers.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
I'm on tier 6.
Yep. And regardless of what's happening, you should know what that is. And it sounds like it might be that. I don't know if anybody else has that.
I
same-
think he's paying into not a tax shelter annuity, but a tier, like I was,
Oh,
as the
Hi,
tiers
Marianne.
go
Yeah.
up, they have to put money into it so the district doesn't have to pay for it.
oh,
He's,
so
he's paying into the retirement system.
Retirement.
gotcha. So that's New
paying
York
in-
State. That's New York
Jacob,
State.
that's
retirement.
different.
Yeah, that's different, Jacob. That's New York State retirement system. So that's different than what I'm talking about. But as a TA, you want to ask that question, do they have a TSA available to you as a TA? So
Okay.
that will be different. You're going to have to pay that, what you're paying out for the New York State retirement regardless. You don't have a choice in that. That's one of those things they're just going to take out. So usually a TSA is something that you choose, yes or no. That what you're paying into now, you don't have a choice.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. Appreciate that.
Sandy, we have a
Uh,
question in the chat from
yeah.
Anthony. Who
Yes,
from
you
school would you
go.
ask?
Yep, you would go to your business office. And the business office is responsible for creating the paychecks, and that person would connect you. And those are the questions you ask. I want some information about a tax shelter annuity, and I'd like to know if the district is associated with a financial advisor whom I could talk to. Okay, so that's who you would call. Anybody in the business office should be able to direct you to that. Okay. Would you
Another
know-
question in there, Sandy.
Substitute teaching, you know, subs do have time towards retirement. And I think you can set it up. And again, the answer to that question will come from your business office. And that's something I actually really need to check on myself so I can answer that in the future, Eric. But call your business office and ask them that question. You know, am I eligible to participate in a TSA as a sub? But I do know that your time as a sub does go towards retirement, the retirement system. Good
Sandy,
question.
can I add something right there,
Yeah,
though?
please. Yeah.
Just so you know, Eric, that once you're on any kind of payroll in a school, you can become a member of the New York State, if you're in New York, the teacher's retirement. You'll start to put money into that account. However, the school will not be paying into that account yet. And the time, you want to keep track of all the time that you worked as a sub, because when you get your first permanent job, you want to find out if that time can be bought back towards years into your retirement. That makes sense to you.
Yes, it does, because I know they do that with coaching as well.
Right.
correct?
Absolutely, with
Absolutely.
coaching. And the other thing I'll add to for all of you is that if you work for any state system, let's say, I know that a lot of my students worked at Jones Beach State Park, and it's the same retirement system. So, well, it rolls into the same retirement system. So I have, like right now as a teacher, if you get a job today, you're going to be in tier 6. And we don't have to get into that. But if, let's say, you've been working at a job, like a state job like the beach, since you're 18 years old, you can technically buy into the system and be whatever tier was at that time when you were 18. And a lot of people don't know that, but if that's your situation, if anybody feels like, they could be like, oh, wow, I do work at the beach in the summer, you can join their retirement system and that will roll into the.
Right, and if you work summers at a school district, if you work at recreation departments, again, I have a friend who was retiring and went to get those records and they had a fire. So you need to keep your own records about where you've worked, what dates you've worked there. And Dr. Manson, can you talk a little bit about the retirement system at the university level, at the college level? It's a little bit different.
So it's different in a private university. So for those of you that are in the SUNYs are in the same exact retirement system, NYSET, as the P12 teachers in New York. It works the same way, same tiers, same everything. In private university, we're not in that retirement system. We are in basically a 401k. Mine happens to be called TIA CREF, but there's Fidelity. There's a whole bunch of different ones. And that's in a private. That does not roll into a state retirement system. So that would be a separate, like in my case, I worked for the New York City DOE for 14 years. So I am vested and I have a pension from the city system, which is very similar to the New York State teachers. And that is separate. So I technically have 2 pensions. I know that the city system rolls into the state. So let's say you start off in New York City and then all of a sudden you get a job somewhere else in New York State, it will roll into that. And that counts, for that. But private university is different. Public university, same exact.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on finances? I mean, there's a lot of questions to be had, but even if you have just this very, very small amount of information, it could make a big, big difference in the end run, the end game for you as you're looking towards retirement. And that's not something I want you to be thinking about right now. I want you to take care of this. And then as you get yourself going, you'll be more tuned into financial kinds of things. But at least if you do this very small thing, you will be so far ahead of the game than many people. Okay. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on interviewing because I think there are a lot of other really good programs out there and some workshops. But on this slide, when you get it, there is a link. I hope it's still good, to an article that I wrote many years ago, but I think it's still pretty applicable in terms of interviewing if you want to read that. But I do want you to remember that when you interview, it's not just them interviewing you, it's you interviewing them. If you ended up in the wrong place, you're not going to be very happy. So it's really a two-way street when you do interview, and you need to know a little bit about them, but you also need to do your homework and don't go in there and ask questions that don't make any sense. The other thing that you have to know to do is you have to let them know what's unique about you. Some of you have some very, very exceptional abilities, and they may or may not show up on a resume, and they may or may not ask you about them. So one of the things that you can use, and I'll give you this one little tip, at the end of the interview, most people say, do you have any questions for us? And you always have to have questions, and they have to be legitimate questions. But one thing you can always ask or say is that, I don't have any questions, but here's something that you didn't ask me that I'd like you to know about me. sometimes you go into interviews saying, oh, I hope they ask me this. I hope they ask me this. I really want to tell them about this experience I had. And they don't. They just don't go there. So if you don't have any real questions because you've done your homework and you know what the building is about, you know what the philosophy is about, and they answered those questions, and they didn't ask you that key question you really wanted to give, that's what you say at the end. Say, you know what? I think you've answered most of my questions, but I really want you to know this piece of information about me. That's a great way to leave it. And that's an option if you don't have any other questions. And you really have to just be yourself. Don't make yourself into something that they want, but that's not you. It has to be who you are. And that doesn't mean, you thumb your nose at things. You have to do some modifications. You have to adjust a little. You have to give a little. But sometimes you go into an interview and it's just not for you. And don't be afraid to do that, but be yourself. Okay. Anybody heard about the Fish Principles? Just a yay or a nay? If you haven't, you can look them up on the web. It's a great book. It's a lot of fun. And it gives you just a philosophy of living, really. And I think it applies really well to who you are as a person when you're teaching. There are 4 principles. First one is choose your attitude. And we do that every day. You get up out of bed and maybe you got up on the wrong side of bed. And I always say, well, get back into bed and get up on the other side then. Be positive. You can choose to be happy, or you could choose to be miserable, and nobody wants to be around a miserable person. So choose your attitude. Make a decision, make a concrete decision to be who you want to be. Be aware of it. Be there. Be there is just about being present. And we talked about this when we talked about talking to people in eye contact. If you're having a conversation with somebody, be in the conversation. And I'll tell you, and I'll bet you you can think of this. Have you ever talked on the phone with someone, and while you're talking, and you're not FaceTiming, and you're not house party, so you really can't see them, and on the other end, you're hearing this, and you're kind of hearing the keyboard going, and they're on the computer while you're talking to them. So that they're not really present. They're double teaming. They're trying to listen and they're trying to do some work. Be present in your conversations. Be present in your interactions with people. It's really important you do that. Make their day. Do something that makes somebody feel special. I had mentioned a note, writing a note. Oh, I'm so excited that you got this new job, or congratulations, you just got a new coaching job, or congratulations, you won the lottery, you had a baby, whatever it is. Do something different, give somebody flowers if they're having a hard time, or just go up to somebody and say, I just want to tell you I was thinking about you. Do something that will make somebody smile, make their day, because by you doing that, it will also make your day. And the last principle of the FISH principles is play. And what that means is just relax and play. Play with your students, play with your colleagues. Let your students see you playing with your colleagues. And I don't mean playing a game necessarily, but being real, interacting, having a good time. Let them see you as a person, not just as a teacher. Took me a long time to find that, probably longer than I wish it had. And if you can be so real with the kids that you teach and with your colleagues, you're going to enjoy the experience you're going to have a lot better, and they will too. I stole this. Dr. Manson, do you know where I stole this from? I stole it from you. I did steal this. Dr. Manson used this, I think, maybe last year, and I loved it. And I think it's just really, really important. There's so many things that you can do as a professional that you don't have to be great at something. You don't have to be the best gymnast. You don't have to have the highest grade in the class. You don't have to have any particular talent to do these. One, be on time, be early, be responsible, have a positive work ethic. Do what you say you're going to do. Put a lot of effort into everything you do. Do it the right way, or don't do it at all. Lots of energy with your kids, with yourself, with your colleagues. Your body language tells a lot to people, whether you're really sincere about what you're doing and what you're saying. So be aware that how you present yourself will tell a lot to other people. Be passionate about this profession. Being a health and physical education teacher is probably the best thing that you could ever choose to do. The people on this call who are experienced professionals who have been in the field for a while are here because they're still passionate about what they do. and they love it. And I do too. So be passionate about what you've chosen to do and let people see that passion. Go the extra mile, do the extra work, help somebody out when they need it, you know? Be prepared, always be prepared, never go into anything unprepared. I will tell you a student teaching nightmare that I had. I taught in the Schenectady Public Schools when I was student teaching, and I was doing pretty well. And I was told I was doing pretty well. And one of the last days, I went in to teach a class of adapted students with two teachers who I really admire. And I really didn't prepare very well. And it was a lousy class. And I felt really bad because these two teachers had really bolstered me up and really taught me well. And I screwed up and I wasn't prepared, and I would never do that again. So always be prepared, no matter whether it's just rehearsing something, whether it's an interview or a class or a meeting, be prepared for what you're going into. Be coachable, be ready to listen. You may not agree with somebody's telling you, but that's your choice to either accept it or get rid of it. But be aware, be ready to listen to somebody who's willing to share with you, and be positive. Always have a positive attitude. These are some of the easiest things that you can do to make yourself a viable professional in your field. So most people don't recognize the opportunity of any opportunity because it's hard work. The difference between a good teacher and a great one is taking responsibility for your own learning and for your own growth. Being here tonight, you've already taken that step. You've already demonstrated that's important to you, but you have to continue with that. There's so many things out there, and you will continue to grow if you give yourself that opportunity. So basically what I've shared with you tonight are a whole bunch of little nuggets. You have to decide if there's anything there that works for you, that's important for you. If it is, you know, conceptually, you throw it in your backpack and you take it along on your ride. And there may be times later in your career when it doesn't work for you anymore and you take it out and you get rid of it. So that's my presentation. I'd be really, really happy. I know that Dr. Manson has put a copy of the presentation in the chat, and I would be happy to take any questions that you might have or comments.
Thank
Well,
you. It was very good.
that means it was really very boring, or
No. I got a lot of notes.
good. I really appreciate the people who are here tonight. You know, being on break, I know you're in a different routine and maybe people didn't get the reminders. So thank you for taking the time, and thank you to Rochelle and Anthony for having me, and Dr. Manson for having me. And I hope you guys please stay safe, and I hope you get back to school safely and finish off your year as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It was wonderful. Before I turn it over back to Rochelle, I just wanted to let you know that in the chat, I did put up the link to the slides of this presentation, so you can download it and keep it. I am also going to put up in the chat right now a link to a certificate of attendance. And this comes from the New York State AHPERD office. So you can have that as well, and you can just open it up and then print it out. I know that there are some professors that were taking that. I know that I've seen a couple of my students in here that needed some hours for something, so they're in here, which is great. And so that you can use that as well. And the other thing that, our presenter tonight talked about, that you've taken that first step into being a professional. You're here tonight. Most of you are on break, or if you're a student, otherwise, even as teachers, we're on break. But the importance of being a member of this organization, of New York State AHPERD. I don't necessarily assume that everybody is a member in here, and if you are, thank you. And if you're not, go to newyorkstateahperd.org, and I'll put that in the chat as well, and become a member. It's not expensive as a student member, and it opens up your world to a lot of professional development, a lot of help in your job search, and just a real connection with other people who are like-minded, and a great place for you to network. Really important, not just as a student, to maintain that as you get into the field. The last thing I'll say before I turn it to Rochelle, I'm putting New York State AHPERD's website up in the chat now, is if there are any teachers in here that need CTLE hours, I know the students do not, but if there are any teachers, please just put your name up in the chat so that I can have your CTLE hours sent. And now, Rochelle, back to you.
Again, everyone, for joining us tonight. I want to reiterate what Dr. Manson said about the importance of becoming a member. If you aren't a member, just being a member, I've been able to engage and meet so many people in the field that think like me and want to work with me. So it's just so many benefits. And the earlier you get involved, the better it is for you. Yeah, thank you, and become a member if you haven't.
Thank you, Rochelle. And I know she introduced our president-elect, Anthony Shabelli. Anthony, you want to say anything?
Definitely just want to thank you all for attending. And of course, Miss Sandy and Morley, amazing presentation. Just gets better than the first time. Can't wait for the next ones to come. And yeah, thank you guys very much for attending.
And before we officially close, mark your calendars. We have our last workshop on February 22nd. There'll be an email reminder with the Zoom link and everything, but mark your calendars early. And with that,
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care, everybody. Be well. Good start to
Bye.
the next semester.